Now the end is near,
Okay.
Nice.
and
How's
so
it going?
I face.
I'm excited for bowling.
All right, good. You're also excited for this. So this is a new thing. This is a new thing for us. I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. I'm going to tell these guys. So I made a list of buzzwords, terms, trends, just sort of phrases that I keep hearing about in my role. And I've put them on in this deck that Major's going to pull up for me. You have 1 minute to tell me your unvarnished thoughts, straight talk about those terms.
Okay.
And you don't really know what all those terms are, so most of this is a surprise to Adam. Cool, so Major, can you put a minute on the clock? First term, agencies, go.
Wannabe tech companies. Don't even need a minute for that one. That's easy.
You don't even need a minute.
Wannabe tech companies.
All right, any agencies in the room? You feeling all right? Okay. Next. You can get another minute.
Actually, you know what? Going back to agencies. Sorry, I'm making it hard for you. I would say that agencies increasingly want to become more like tech companies. And ironically, I'd say tech companies ironically want to become more like agencies. Every tech company seems to have some sort of a studio or a garage or some kind of very fun name that basically amounts to we can handle creative and thinking and strategy. And agencies are like, well, we got these tech incubation centers for you. And it becomes almost increasingly challenging to realize where does the agency start in the way you might traditionally think about an agency and where does it end? And then the same thing on the tech platform side, right? You thought it was a tech platform, then you realized, but they also have creative services, and they also have planning and buying, and they also have, a conceptualization, incubation, something, thing to give you some crazy idea that's on there.
Right.
So I think it becomes more and more difficult every day to tell what a definition of an agency is.
Okay, but I do have a follow-up for that. But you could say the same thing about brands. I mean, how many brands have incubators now? How many brands are sort of doing all that, have a content studio? I know a lot of brands with their own in-house production.
I have often believed that there is a general playbook that amounts when brands sort of realize that they maybe let something pass them by.
Right.
I think it's generally in that box. And say, okay, so we're going to create an innovation center. Then we're going to have some type of a studio. We're going to open up a shop in Silicon Valley or XYZ hotspot location, and then we're going to go do this, and we're going to do this. It's very much a checklist thing. Now, this isn't inherently bad, right? I mean, there are generally really good reasons to do it, the best of which is to, frankly, tell the internal organization, we're serious about this. Like, we actually have this physical location. We have this content studio. We have this physical presence, and when things are physical, all of a sudden they change, the perception internally dramatically. So don't disagree with you, but I think it's generally part of the evolution of trying to play catch up to getting where you probably need to be.
Can we have another minute? Okay, next. Beacons.
Untapped potential, and at the same time, just wrought with potential challenges.
Like what?
I think about literally the scene in Minority Report, where the last thing I want is walking into a store and push notification, like every 5 steps that I take, right? It's such a potentially interruptive experience if done incorrectly. And I think beacons are probably one of the things that have been talked about, I feel like the last 5 years, with some amount of promise and hope.
Yeah.
And part of why I think, frankly, you haven't seen them scale has been 2 things. One, the form factor continues to change over time. Like the first beacon devices were like this big. Now they're like this big. I mean, they're super tiny, right? And the ability to control what you can do with the beacon has changed over the last 5 years. And I think as the tech continues to change, every retailer, CPG, brand, tech platform thinks to themselves, how do I do it right? Because the minute you do it wrong, right, all of a sudden I turn off push notifications. I don't want them from you as a brand anymore,
Right.
and you lose that ability to connect with the customer.
Absolutely. Good. Right on the minute. Another minute. Attribution.
Should be so much simpler than it is. I feel like for the last decade, there's been some type of a conversation around attribution. And you would think that in 2015, as we very, very rapidly approach 2016, that there would just be some kind of an out-of-the-box solution that you just plug inside, and all of a sudden all your attribution problems are solved.
Hey, business idea.
I would love it. So if anyone wants to go create a content partnership studio around attribution, let's go do this after this, obviously in the Valley. But I think the part of the challenge with attribution becomes fragmentation. So how do I attribute the fact that you and I had a conversation about a topic, which led me to search for something on Google, which then led me to Nordstrom, which then led me to Nordstrom retargeting me, repeatedly in Facebook about this one pair of pants. And then how do I tell Nordstrom I already bought the pair of pants? And they're like, well, did you buy it on like our mobile app? Did you buy it here? So I completely understand the challenge with attribution. It just, as a digital marketer, it saddens me that 18 years later, I've been doing this since '97. I'm still having conversations about attribution.
I feel like I've noticed a theme in your thing, which is like, oh God, it's 2015. We
I
haven't figured
know.
this out yet.
Like, I just want it to be,
Back to
you
the
know,
Future
all
was
fixed.
so wrong.
It was wrong.
So wrong. All right, another minute. Programmatic.
Programmatic. I would say from a brand perspective, lots of blurry lines on ownership, right? The easiest thing sometimes is very clean boxes. You know, who owns this, who owns that, and it's not so much about the, I want to own this, but more about understanding, you know, what level of participation and what level of accountability I'm supposed to have with it. So take programmatic. You have the buying side. So what percentage of our media is going to be tied to things that can be done programmatically? Then you have the tech side, right? So who's going to own the relationship with the platform, you know, with the platform provider? Then you have the attribution part of it.
Right.
And you have first-party data. And if you looked at a large organization, any large organization, you know, you have different people in each of those different areas. And frankly, in a case like programmatic, you almost need one person to say, like, I've got this. Right. And it's not about not wanting to collaborate with the rest of you, but I'm responsible for it.
Do you think we've made it more complicated than it needs to be?
I don't think we've made it more complicated than it needs to be. I think because it can be so many different things based on who you are as a brand, creates complication. It's not as easy as saying, we're going to send out emails. Therefore, I need an email service provider, and I need someone to create content, and I might need some proofreaders. I mean, you go through the list. It's a pretty short list. Yeah. You said programmatic. Like, where do you want to take programmatic? And it can be infinite, you know, in terms of the tech stack.
Another minute. Okay, social commerce.
Let's just drop social from the, you know, from the prefix of it, right? It should all be about commerce, you know, to begin with. I think, you know, those who 10 years ago, 8 years ago, I guess, who said, you know, social is organic, and I remember the number of consultants that came out and were charging something like $27,000 an hour, you know, to advise you on thinking about social and how it's about the conversation, it's about this, and you're like, right, but how does it make money? You're like, well, it's not supposed to make money. You're like, but then why am I doing this, right? And honestly, like, there's a little bit of that where it's like, you know, not everything's going to maybe make money immediately, so to speak, or not everything's going to generate a return immediately. But you have to somehow think, whether you are a pure.com or you're a brick and mortar, whether you're some kind of a hybrid in there, everything you do, you have to eventually be able to show leads to some type of action. Now, the action doesn't have to be a sale. It could be a sign up, it could be a review, it could be a download of an app. I mean, it could be any number of things. But I think the prefix of social commerce somehow says that social can be something that you shouldn't think about in terms of driving some type of, you know, fiduciary responsibility back to the organization.
Okay. Another minute. You're really good. 1 minute. Last time we did this, it wasn't like this. Brands as publishers.
Brands as
Taking
publishers. Everybody wants to be a publisher except for the publishers.
I know.
Right? You know. I mean, if you were to sort of read the headlines, right, every publisher's like, you know, it's such a tough business to be in, and, you know, I'm looking to merge with this company, and this company's going to merge with that company. And then brands are like, no, we want to be a publisher. Like I'm sort of anticipating there'll become a point, and I don't think we're too far off, where you'll see say like a CPG, a cooking brand, buy something like, you know, the publications that include Real Simple, Cooking Light, and a bunch of other things that are there. And with good reason. You know, brands, by definition, don't hire people who are publishing background people. They're not hiring journalists, you know, journalism people. They're not hiring folks who understand how to run a newsroom. And it's part of why you then need partners that are there. So the idea, though, what I will say, that you need to think like a publisher in the sense of, if there's something that's out there, you have to be able to move on it very quickly. Completely agree with that. But you know, when I sort of look at it, I want to get my news from an actual publisher. I don't want to get my news from, you know, another brand.
Coca-Cola.
Oh, you said Coca-Cola. I didn't say Coca-Cola.
Sponsored content.
Increasingly difficult to tell what's sponsored content, what's not sponsored content. You know, you have contributors now on the publisher side, right? And that contributor potentially has an axe, if you will, or has a certain point of view. And they're writing about something that they might be an advisor to begin with. And you go, well, isn't that really sponsored content? I mean, they are literally using the platform they have to talk about, you know,
Give
an
me
investment.
an example of what you're talking about, like one you've seen, or
well, I mean,
sketch it out.
well, so like HuffPo, right, will let anyone be a contributor. CNN lets anyone be a contributor, right? And I can talk about anything I want to talk about. I can use my 1,000 words to talk about everything great that's happening at Walgreens. Now, I'm not paying for that, but it's also not really, you know, journalistic. It's totally lacking in journalistic integrity, right? So when I sort of think about sponsored content, it'd be very difficult to figure out, did company X send product to publisher Y, and then publisher Y wrote this fantastic review about this product, and they didn't actually tell you about all the things that happen behind the scenes and the fact that company X is also a multi-million-dollar, advertiser on there.
Right.
So I think you kind of have this spot where it's very great to determine. Sure, it doesn't say sponsor at the top, but is it sponsored?
Okay, I see what you're saying. But then, I
You
wanted to
can't
ask
say
you-
that. That's on the buzzword bingo chart.
Well, before that though, then what's native advertising?
I mean, I kind of think they're one and the same. I think it's really difficult to tell the difference, say, between what you would call native and what you would call sponsored. The difference might come in potentially how you're buying it or potentially how it's placed in the stream. But at the end of the day, if you're spending a good portion of your day debating whether something is sponsored or native, you're spending your time in the way wrong bucket.
Okay. All right, good. All right, here's a freebie, ROI.
So like I sort of look at ROI in the way that it almost becomes like a prison cell, right? Because if you said to yourself that everything needs to be about return on investment, but the general perception is return on investment means financial return.
Right.
But ROI can be so many other different things, right? I mean, the download of an app, leaving a review, getting someone to provide feedback. I mean, all those different things have to be taken into account. And I think a lot of times we think about ROI as a very simple formula, right? I spent X, I should see a return of Y.
Yep.
But it's so much more complex than that. And I think that's probably one of the toughest things with ROI in any organization. I don't care if you're a brand, a publisher, an agency, trying to understand how your company or that company you're working with thinks about ROI as a formula.
How do you think about ROI at Walgreens?
So I want to look at, let's say, content. It's not good enough for me to understand what I paid to get a piece of content in front of someone to generate an action.
Right.
I got to look at the cost of the content. I got to look in like the routing fees if you're using a DSP. Like all those different things kind of come into it, and you end up with like a true net sum. And my favorite example might be a colleague of mine. Since he didn't give me permission to give his name, I will say that he realized that if you took that very long view of ROI, the content that they were putting out, that the agency would argue is not 100% perfect or on brand, generates an exponential return because if you add in the cost of the content to create it,
Right.
you go ROI negative. So sure, that one piece of thing, that one piece of kind of video generated 1,000 clicks with a $10 return on each one. Now add in the cost of the content, and all of a sudden that goes negative.
Got it. I already gave you that one. Ad Tech Industrial Complex.
Sounds like a movie by J.J. Abrams.
Would you watch it?
Probably.
Oh.
And only if it was like on something like.
Oh, would you watch it in a movie theater? They're like $18 to watch a movie now. Would you spend $18 to watch this movie by J.J. Abrams?
I would probably stream it on Netflix.
Okay.
But I mean, could you not see a situation where there's like someone brought in from the past, into an agency to help that agency like recapture the soul of whoever it is in some new digital world, and like I can absolutely see that as an ad tech industrial complex movie. And in fact, I'm going to call AJJ after this and be like, hey, we need an incubator in Silicon Valley to create the ad tech industrial complex.
So riveting. All right, I'm going to do multiple choice. Most exciting new platform,
Tinder.
Snapchat, Paris. Whoa.
Tinder. So here's the thing I will tell you. If you go to my website, adamkmiec.com, I did one of the things I like to do is like to try completely new things, right? So like actually last year I learned to snowboard. I always try to find one new thing. And on the tech advertising side, I always substitute one favorite thing that I do for something that's completely new that I just don't understand. So I told my wife, I said, listen, I'm creating a Tinder account and we're going to Tinder together for the next 30 days.
What does that mean?
And she was like, what do you mean Tinder together? I was
Right.
like, well, you can see everything that like I'm doing on there. Like I don't care. Like I need to understand why everyone keeps telling me, well, you don't have swipe functionality like Tinder. Like I have no idea what you're talking about. Or you don't understand the gamification that's going on here. Not to mention at the same time, I had colleagues of mine saying, hey, have you seen like Tinder's ad product? It's actually pretty good. And I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So for 30 days, I was on Tinder, and sort of three things that came out of my mind. One, they are completely changing and tying into the future of user behavior, right? Everything today is tied to some type of a swipe. Whether you're using Safari on a Mac, or you're using Chrome on a mobile device, everything is moving towards some type of a swipe or touch, tactility. And I think it's really interesting. The second is the gamification piece. It's like swipe, swipe, swipe. Like, oh no, I didn't want to swipe. Oh, by the way, you can pay $5 a month in order to be able to like undo that. Like genius, right? It's like I made a mistake and I want to undo it, but I can't undo it unless I pay.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, it's only $5. I'll go ahead and do that, right? The gamification is like absolutely brilliant. And then the third part was I kind of felt like another brick in the wall of this is like a tragic world of society that we live in, right? Where, swipe, 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 all of a sudden, like, that's the person I'm gonna marry? And I'm like, man, like maybe like my daughter who's 8 in like 20 years, she's gonna be like, Dad, I met Zane on Tinder Pro or something like that. And I'm like, what's Tinder Pro? And she's like, oh, it's this app where like it actually uses your eyes to like swipe left and right. Like no idea.
Right.
But at least I just feel like what they have cracked, you can start seeing in what other brands are doing in mobile.
We've almost run it, but I want to ask you, are you intrigued by their ad product as a brand?
So going back to the question on sponsored versus native, I think they figured out a great way to integrate the ad product. If you've ever seen the ad product, it's basically a card. It looks like a profile. So like your swipe, 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 it's like, well, if I'm interested, keep swiping. No click, no nothing else. If I'm not interested, go away, and the algorithm learns about the stuff you don't like. Like pretty neat in terms of not interrupting the experience.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Most exciting old platform, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn.
Email. I know
That's
it's not
not
on the
an
list.
option.
I know,
No,
but I kind of
that's
think email
okay.
doesn't get enough love. And I feel like, oh, no one uses email, no one thinks about email. But it's amazing though to think that even something like LinkedIn, what happens when you do a LinkedIn request? The first thing you get 5 seconds later, an email with someone's lifelong story about how they have the perfect product that you absolutely need, and you have to buy it right now, right?
That's true.
But email, I think, actually is completely untapped, right? And specifically, if you're anyone who sits on some type of personal PII, some type of customer data, email, I think, is probably like one of the most untapped. On this list, I would say Twitter is the one I'm most excited about, only because I feel like the minute you bring in some amount of new leadership, you bring in a sea of change, you're almost waiting with anticipation for what's going to come next.
Yeah, that's true. You use Periscope?
More of a Meerkat guy.
Okay, most overhyped marketing trend then. VR, live streaming, or data-driven creativity? I don't know what that means.
Well, data-driven creativity should just be on the buzzword card if it's not. I would say virtual reality, and only because much in the way that I think Google Glass got everyone really excited and they realized the price point for it, and you realize how much of a closed wall it was to develop for it, I just can't imagine the average family of 4 saying, I'm going to shell out $1,000 per unit, plus the cost of all the software to run it. I mean, it might be something that in 5 years, 10 years, you kind of get that sweet spot of price point, but then at the same time, I look at the other way and I go, I never would have imagined the number of people who are on those hoverboard things. Those things are like $400 a pop.
Yeah?
And the number of people
We're
I see.
giving one away as for a photo contest.
Oh, dude, I'm so there. But that's the only thing I want for Christmas. Like I told my wife, she's like, what do you want? I was like, I want a hoverboard. She's like, how old are you? And I was like, I want a hoverboard.
I want Tinder and I want hoverboard.
Tinder and a hoverboard.
This is what you marry. This is what you
That's
get. You know what industry though? VR, porn. I mean, untapped potential here. Seriously.
I'm gonna have to ask my wife about that, if I can do that.
Adam, thank you so much.
Thank
This
you.
was awesome. I really